All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to take a few minutes. I've started the broadcast, but I am going to take a few minutes and make sure everyone is able to hear and see me. I will be sharing a screen in a minute, but you should be seeing me right now. There is no audio or video for participants just because of confidentiality and the platform that we're using. But there is a little place to the right of your screen, I believe it's on the right, it says questions. So if you would like to type a question, if you're having trouble hearing me or you cannot see me or there's something weird on the screen, let me know, and I will try and fix that, because I was trying to play around with sharing my screen earlier and it might be weird right now. And we will get started pretty quickly, but I am going to leave just a couple minutes to let people get settled with technology, and myself as well. If I see any questions come up, try and fix those. If you are settled in your space, a couple things that I'll remind everybody in a minute again about is you might want to have a pen and paper. You want to have a little bit of room. We're going to do a little bit of movement. It's okay if you're at a desk. But if you're, in your living room or on a yoga mat or whatever, that's also great too. You'll be very comfortable there doing it, but it will be things you can do in a chair. And otherwise, just get settled in. And we'll start here in about 1 or 2 minutes. All right. So I'm getting ready to get started. So I'm going to play my keynote, and you should be able to see that. Okay. So welcome again. My name is Jessica King, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm also a yoga teacher and the owner of Still Point Counseling and Wellness. I'm here to share today some strategies, some skills for managing anxiety in uncertain times. I did a part 1 about a month ago, and it kind of came around because our entire world is in this uncertain time. These skills and these ideas are things that have been around forever and are constantly present. It just seems to be heightened in this world that we're living in now with the pandemic. So offering some skills for folks to be able to utilize, because it is a very stressful time, and as stress rises, oftentimes, as you'll see in the presentation, anxiety rises, and then we start to have maybe negative health outcomes or experiences in our life due to that. So just being able to offer that to you all, and let's see, we'll move on with that. Well, hold on, it looks like you guys may not be seeing what I'm seeing. Let me escape that. Oh, play. Ah, that's what it was. It was paused. Okay. Sorry, a little bit of technical difficulties, right? Part of our life. I'm not really sure why it's not letting Keynote move forward when I have full screen. I'm just going to kind of pause and start over. Sorry. All right, I'm going to show it as my screen. Okay, perfect. I'm hoping this works a little better. I need to go back here. All right, so yay, I think this will work a little bit better. So same things, Jessica King here to offer you some skills today. Like I said, you might want a piece of paper and a pen. You want to be comfortable. We're going to do a little bit of movement, and the paper and pen can be to take notes, but it also can just be to do some of the exercises that we're doing and kind of write your experiences. Change is the only constant in life. So the theme of today is learning to kind of lean into that idea that really the only thing that we can depend on is that things are going to change. And that can be really hard. And sometimes that's may even, if you like check in with yourself a little bit, maybe even start to feel a little anxiety or a little worry, just even thinking about that. And so we're going to talk about, it's one of the skills, being able to lean into uncertainty, being able to kind of increase our tolerance and distress around working and being in that space, and just knowing that things are going to change. As I said, I did a part one, and so this was part of that. And if you, I'm just going to briefly kind of set the stage for why we're using the skills. But if you want more information around this, you might want to jump back in and check in part one. I did a lot more explanation of anxiety and stress than I will today. And in my other workshops and working with clients, we can dig in even deeper because it's just such a big topic. What I offer in these mini kind of hour-long sessions are kind of a reductive idea, but it helps you understand. And I truly believe that when we know better, then we do better. And so I always like to offer some information. And maybe you've already done your own digging and you know a little bit more in this area, which is great. But what is anxiety? What it's not is that it's not stress. So stress is a kind of a two-part thing, but it is the trigger or the experience that happens, the stimulus in our environment that creates these feelings starting to come up. And then the feelings, the stress response, what we do from that is also part of stress. So, but anxiety is not stress. And we're going to talk about stress in just a minute. It's also not an indicator that you're broken or flawed. Anxiety is a natural human reaction that most everyone in this world has experienced, and it's just your humanness that you're being able to have it. So that's not an indicator, and it's not a life sentence. So yes, there's genetic predisposition, and there's folks that may tend to be a little bit more anxious. But when we learn skills, when we learn how to manage our anxiety and how to tap into that ability to just sit and be still in those times of uncertainty, it can be managed and you can find some relief. So there's hope in that, right? But anxiety is a feeling, or I like to talk about feelings as really energy. It's an energy that's just showing up to help us respond in our environment. When we can reframe it like that, there's almost a shift. So you might even just pause for a second and kind of think about that and notice what happens in your body when you shift your idea from my anxiety is a problem, my anxiety is high, or I'm worried too much, or this is wrong with me, and just think, this is just an energy that's showing up to help me respond to my environment and what's happening now. Even just that reframe, that statement, can help us feel a little bit more at ease. And we'll talk about how we know we're more at ease or what's happening in just a minute. So just briefly, what stress is a response to an external cue that often subsides after the trigger has stopped. So it is, again, that stimulus that comes from our environment. And typically in our perfect world, once that stimulus is gone, then the stress or the feelings of that stress, the response we're having in that stress would go away. those responses are different for everyone, but it could be increased heart rate, it could be feeling energized, having maybe even tension in the body because there's this increased flood of blood flow to our muscles and our major muscle groups. Tummy aches because there's decreased blood flow to those digestive organs. So there's a number of those things. And again, part one digs in a little deeper to that, and there can be more information there. But just to know, stress is just that external cue, and it does play into our feelings of anxiety that come up. So that's why we're talking about it today. But there's two different kinds. There's eustress. So there's this positive form of stress that motivates us, that helps us stay focused, and it's within our normal coping abilities. We have the resources to tackle that. That's like, getting a deadline at work. That could be eustress and motivates us to finish that project. Then there's distress, a negative form of stress that shows up that causes excessive worry, anxiety. That's when it's coming up. It's really outside of our normal coping abilities, or at least we perceive it to be. And then that results in decreased performance. So the opposite is happening. We're not meeting those goals, or we might even have more mental or physical health problems. This is where maybe because of that stress, generalized anxiety is showing up, or depression, or even maladaptive coping, alcohol, substance use, eating disorders. So distress and excessive distress is getting us into poor functioning and poor health outcomes, which again is a whole body of knowledge that we're not going to talk about today. But again, reframing that back, that stress is our body's response system, and it's a beautiful response that keeps us safe. And also, when we can practice skills to manage that stress, we build resilience to challenges, so that when we have the next challenge, we actually are more capable of handling it, and the stress doesn't impact us as the way it did before. So that's what today will all be about, is building that resilience. And why this helps anxiety is because we may have a window of tolerance, right? So we have this space that like we are functioning really well in, and I have my hands here because this is my window. In normal times, or maybe like before Corona, before this pandemic, your baseline may have been down here at that lower level of your window. And because of just what's happening in our environment, that's the stressor, the pandemic, the virus, that baseline is just a little bit higher, right? And then if we're a little bit higher, maybe we only have that little bit of room before we're getting out of our window and out of our coping abilities. And so then like we're here in the pandemic dealing with all those things, and then kids have to go back to school, but you have to homeschool them. Now we're outside of that window of tolerance, and it seems excessive. And maybe this energy that's showing up, that anxiety, isn't tolerable anymore. And it is starting to feel like distress. So we're going to talk really around how can we manage the stress when we see it show up, so that we can widen this window of tolerance. We have a better ability to manage the symptoms that come up, and also the feelings that are coming up. All right. I'm going to talk about this from a holistic perspective. And again, part one really describe this in more detail, but just briefly, the practices and from holism, from like really taking this from a whole body perspective, I want to work from the top down, which means I want to work in my cognitive functioning. It's really talking about the brain. So my cognitive functioning, but it's just the way I like to explain it is like all the energies that are up here, all the stuff that's going on in my head, and maybe outside of my body even. I want to work with that to allow calming in the body, which is like moving down our brain to the brainstem. Bottom up practices are going to start in that brainstem, but the way I like to describe it is I'm going to figure out how to calm my body, so that then my mind is calmer. I have more clarity, I'm clear, and I can work with those cognitive processes. So we're going to do both of those things. I want to really explore or encourage the idea of leaning into uncertainty with a compassionate presence. So can I increase my ability to tolerate being with change, being with not knowing and out of control, while being compassionate with myself, not negatively criticizing or negative self-talk? Can I do that? Because when I can, then I start to see new possibilities and choices, and that's what helps anxiety. Anxiety is oftentimes, I like to describe to clients, is this place where we feel like we have to solve all the problems that we have right now with no one else to help us. We have to do it all by ourselves. And most of the time that's not the case. So when we can kind of lean into those feelings that we're having, we start to see new possibilities and choices, and that allows us to just flow with life's changes. There's lots of reading out there about like getting in the flow and different things like that. And that's what they're really talking about, is can I sit in this place of uncertainty? Can I let everything else move around me and just move on? Just flow with it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So incorporating both a bottom-up and top-down approach to managing stress and anxiety promotes resilience. And resilience is our ability to transform from challenging situations. So we're not just going to bounce back. We're not going to be the same as we were before. We actually transform. We're more adaptable. We're able to handle greater challenges in the future. All right. So our first skill today, lean into that uncertainty. And oftentimes people are like, but that doesn't feel good, right? And we do lots of things as human beings to not feel uncomfortable. So this first skill is really not necessarily going to make you feel better. It actually might make you feel a little distressed to start with. And so you got to build your tolerance to dealing with that. And the way we do that is to utilize self-compassion and loving kindness. So if you have not done a lot of work in self-compassion, the resource here is Kristin Neff. So throughout this, I'm going to give you a few resources. A lot of what I bring to you is my experience in the field, what I have learned myself, what works, and it also comes from folks that I learn from, and especially when it's a very specific skill set, or I've just learned it, or if it's a specific skill, I love to be able to note that, and you can go and find these resources to build upon, because I'm giving you a very small chunk of her research right now. So Kristin Neff, she has a book. She also has a website with lots of free resources. So that's something to note down. And if negative self-talk and being really hard on yourself is a problem and part of your anxiety, this would be a great place to start. So utilizing self-compassion, Kristin Neff breaks it down really into what I feel like is 3 parts, but it is, one, we have to have the mindful awareness that we are being self-critical and we're being hard on ourselves. So first we have to know when we're doing it. So there might be times where that's just the natural response, right? It's the first thing that happens. And so increasing our mindfulness around when it happens. So maybe for a second, just thinking about what are some of the ways in which you speak negatively to yourself. Maybe there's one thing that comes up often. And maybe just jotting it down. With the intention this week to just bring more mindful awareness around when that happens. The second part is that we're going to take a perspective of humanity. So we're going to insert ourselves into that humanness that we have, because we often hold ourselves to such a higher standard than we would to anyone else. Think about that thought that you just wrote down, that negative self-talk that you often tell yourself, and imagine yourself telling that to your child or to your best friend or to your partner or maybe a stranger. And imagine what that would feel like to speak to that person like that, or what their reaction would be, or how it would make you feel, to speak to them. And oftentimes it seems outrageous, right, that we would speak to another person that way, but we do it to ourselves. So it's in inserting ourselves in humanity and saying, okay, I'm here again at this space where things are uncertain. I'm starting to worry a lot. I'm starting to maybe have some negative self-talk. I'm starting to experience whatever symptoms are that come up for you. And again, we dig a little bit into to reflecting on those and knowing those in part one. And so maybe that's some space that you need to sit in, is like, what are your triggers and what are your symptoms that come up before you do this. But then saying, this is a normal, natural reaction in this moment. I bet a lot of other people would also be worrying a lot if they didn't know what was going to be coming, in a couple months, or when this pandemic was going to end, or whatever the trigger is, whatever the problem is, recognizing that you're just having a human reaction. And then the third part is actually extending yourself that self-compassionate narrative. Can you reframe what you just said to yourself? Can you talk to yourself in a self-compassionate way and with loving kindness? That you are just experiencing this and being in this space, and that this too will pass. This will change. So again, there's a lot more support in that, because I think if you've never really thought about talking to yourself self-compassionately, it can feel foreign and feel like, oh, I don't know if that's really going to work. But check out some of the resources and see if that's supportive for you. All right. Whoops. Why is it not showing my main screen? Again, technical difficulties. Oh. Sorry about that. Thank you guys for oh my goodness, it closed my, here we go. Okay, we're back to grounding, and we're going to show, and I do not know why it keeps taking it away. Okay, really apologize. All right, I think we're back to where we need to be. Okay. All right, so grounding. I appreciate your patience, guys. So grounding, our next skill. And so once we recognize that we're in this place of anxiety, or maybe the stress is mounting, maybe we're before that, maybe we're noticing the triggers and the external symptoms of stress, or maybe we're noticing this energy of anxiety showing up. And we've talked to ourselves self-compassionately. I'm here in this space again. It's a normal response to a very stressful, a very challenging situation. And what am I going to do with that? So grounding is a great skill for maintaining presence in the moment. So staying in the present moment is going to help us not have that excessive worry or fear that the thing in the past is going to occur again, or that this thing is going to happen in the future, right? So we live in the past, we live in the future. Oftentimes in anxiety, both of those things are happening. In the present, none of those things are happening. So we want to shift ourselves back to the present moment. And we can do that using our senses. And there's 3 ways that we really support balancing the nervous system. And one of them is exteroception. So that's why I gave you that word there. But it's really like, can I ground in what's going on around me in this moment? So can I increase my awareness around me? And one of the ways we can do that, well, there's several. Any type of way that we can use our senses is going to help you. One of the ways that I want to practice today together is in visually orienting. So we're going to come back to that one, and that's the practice we're going to do together in just a second. But you could do this with smells. You could have a candle that you really like to light. an essential oil, the smell of your food, so if you get anxious around meal times, can I orient out of the space of like my thinking thoughts that are in the past or future, and can I just breathe in the way the food is smelling now, right? Touch. So can I feel the texture of my clothes as I'm sitting here, or the way this chair feels underneath me? It's solid and hard, touch. Hearing is a great way because we can do that without anyone noticing. Just sitting where we are, say there's some anxiety or stress mounting while you're sitting at the DMV, which I don't know if you really go in and sit at the DMV anymore, but you know what I mean? Those places where like you're just waiting and there's lots of people around and whatnot. Can I start to think about the layers of the sound? So what do I hear immediately here in this room? Can I hear more? Can I hear a couple more sounds in the room than what I was before? Then can I hear something outside of this space, and then maybe outside the building? So really just increasing our awareness around what's going on in the moment. Taste, you carry gum or candy with you, hot tea, really focusing on the way it tastes. Your breakfast smoothie, that's very grounding to take a sip and really notice the flavors, or even the temperature of water, cold water. Great skill for to grounding back into the moment. But let's take a second to talk about visually orienting. So this is this stimulates the vagus nerve. Again, I think I spoke about this in part 1 a little bit, but our vagus work really helps to support bringing us back to homeostasis or balance, this place where we like to, there's a little catchphrase called rest and digest. So my body feels restful and I'm digesting, doing all the processes my body needs to do, and also tend and befriend. So being able to be socially engaged with others. And if our vagus nerve is stimulated, if our vagal tone is high, then we are more able to do that and be in that space. And visually orienting, in the way I'm going to show you in a minute, does that for us. So what you're going to do is we're going to check in with all the things around the room, but I want you to do it in a way where you move your head all around. So you're going to move your head and neck. Nothing else, just the head and neck. And as you look around, you're not labeling or creating stories about what you see. You're just really trying to take in maybe the color of things, or noticing where light hits, or letting your eyes move and gravitate towards a texture or a shape that you really like, or that just draws your attention in. And just allow yourself to receive it without creating a story or any kind of mind. And again, move the head all around. So you might even look up to both sides. There might be a light or a texture that really draws you in. And so go ahead and let yourself linger there for a moment. Your head might even go down through center. So there's a little bit of a relaxation and a stretch in this because you're moving your neck, but you're really letting your eyes land. And notice, maybe in the next 30 seconds or so, if the body wants to take a nice deep breath, or you yawn, or you swallow. Those are good indicators that your parasympathetic nervous system is coming back online, which is our rest and digest. All right. So that skill isn't always helpful for everyone. So I'm not going to say it's 100% going to work all the time. But probably for about 80% of the population, visually orienting really slowly in that way where we really pay attention to the content of what's around us is regulating. We will feel our system, our nervous system come back online, and we will feel regulated. So trying to ground and be and maintain presence is important. All right. Breathing techniques. So breathing is another thing that is going to be a direct connection to stimulating our nervous system in a way that brings around resting, brings us back to balance or homeostasis. It is one of the skills around interoception. So as exteroception was looking out and grounding out into what's going on around us, noticing that, interoception is being able to really notice what's going on inside. And this can be really difficult. So if for you this is a very uncomfortable thing and is dysregulating at first, know that that is normal. Especially folks that have experienced some trauma or are in a highly adjusted place or in a point of high anxiety, sometimes going inward can be a little scary. So we can take it, what we want to do is titrate and just take it in very small doses of what is tolerable and build to that. So the first way we do that is maybe just an awareness of breath. So the picture I have is of someone sitting in meditation, eyes closed, touching their body. That it could be highly dysregulating for a lot of folks. But maybe if you just take your seat for a second, wherever you are, if you're sitting on a yoga mat or the floor or chair, just sitting back, feeling grounded. And just note it without closing the eyes or anything. Just let your eyes maybe land on one fixed point, or just take the gaze down the bridge of the nose or a little lower. Just notice the breath. You know, feeling the breath maybe as it coolly comes in through the nose. And how as you exhale, the breath is a little warmer. So just letting that breath be gentle and having an awareness of it. That might be all that's tolerable right now. And then as you practice that more and more, you may be able to move into some of these other places. One of the things that we know resets our nervous system is very long exhales. So breathing is important, and we have to have the inhale to bring in the breath. But the exhale is what's going to bring us back to that balance, what's going to feel the body kind of settle down, right? To kind of move into that more grounded place. So as you start to bring more and more awareness to your breath, maybe taking, just that regular inhale and then really extending the exhale. And that can be through your nose or mouth. In yoga tradition, we typically breathe through the nose, except for special breathing techniques. But for a lot of breathing that's taught in psychotherapy and in other traditions, there's a breath out the mouth. And so I think whichever one feels more regulating for you is the one you should do. A breath out the mouth with the lips kind of pursed and the tongue down off the roof of the mouth is very cooling. So if anxiety brings you a lot of heat, if that's one of your symptoms, you feel really hot, breathing out the mouth with those really pursed lips, almost like you're creating a straw with your tongue, is going to be very cooling for the body. So you might try that right now, just taking a slow breath in and a long breath out. A very slow breath in and an even longer breath out. So that's another breathing technique. There are millions of breathing techniques. And again, in other workshops and in work with clients, we can kind of find the one that's right for you. So these are just some beginning techniques. And then coherent breathing is just breathing at a certain rate for a certain amount of time. And so I like to start sometimes with individuals counting 3 breaths in and 5 breaths out, 5 or 6. And then moving to maybe 4 breaths in and then breathing out 7 or 8 counts. So look at our time. So we'll take just about a minute and I'll walk you through that. So again, if it's not comfortable to close your eyes, you're just going to slightly look over the bridge of the nose. And you want to feel grounded. You want to feel upright. So before you do that, find your seat. So if you're in a chair, you're going to sit a little taller, feet on the floor. If you're on your yoga mat or on the floor, you're going to, just find a comfortable position, but sit alert and tall because you want lots of space for this breath to flow through. And then you set your gaze either along the bridge of the nose, or for this breath, if it is comfortable to close your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. And just take a full breath out. And then we'll begin to inhale for 3, 2, 1. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 3, 2, 1. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, inhale 3, 2, 1. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Taking it 2 more times on your own. Then just let the breath come back to normal. Just a natural rhythm. No control, no counting. And just notice, have an awareness of what's going on internally. Your heart rate, your breathing. And then let the eyes float open if they were closed, and just return back to our session here together. All right. So breathing, another technique. Move the energy. So proprioception, that's where our body is in space. Can we pay attention to that? Before I go to that, because that's what we're going to do together, when I say move the energy, I think it's anything. So we're going to do some stretching together. That's what the picture is here. But it is, if we go back, we didn't talk about the body stress response system, but if you know anything about it, you've watched part 1 to this series, you know that sometimes it shows up in our body because in our stress response system, it is wanting to keep us safe. And in some ways, it's adaptive to either run away from something that could be harming us, fight it, or in some cases, there's a freeze response. But oftentimes stress mounting in our body is we're holding that in and holding that tension, and all our body wants to do is release it. So any kind of movement, whether that's taking a walk outside, because being in nature can be another coping skill, but taking a walk, if you run, if you do any kind of exercise for you that is just natural and feels good in your body, that is going to be helpful to moving that energy out. Now, one of the things that we need to do to build resilience is if we've done that exercise, then we need to be able to recognize and find a slow moment to stay in that balance. Oftentimes what happens if we, maybe you're a runner, is like you throw in that run in the beginning of your morning, and then you hop back into your house and you start making breakfast, getting ready for work. If you have tasks that you have to do for other people that live in your house, or so you just keep going. And there is not a stretching, there is not a sitting down on the sofa, drinking a glass of water. But we need to really have some awareness and experience that space of being like in the balance once we expend the energy. And that's where yoga is really helpful, because we do them both in the class. We stimulate the sympathetic part of our nervous system. We challenge it, but then we actively come back. That and any slow, mindful movement is going to encourage proprioception. So even if you do Tai Chi or any kind of martial arts or any other kind of like slow, mindful movement, it is going to help to manage stress, build resilience, and decrease our negative feelings of anxiety in our body. So proprioception is just going to be aware, again, of where our body is in space, and we can pair this with interoception of notice what's going on inside. So we'll just do a quick little exercise together so that we can get to the last few skills. But if you are in a chair, again, scoot back from your desk so that you have enough space. And then if you are you're sitting on the floor or whatever, or you do have a yoga mat or space in your mat, you might want to move to the floor there and just have enough space to move around a little bit. All right, so if you're in the chair, feel your feet grounded on the floor, and if you're on the floor, feel your sits bones rooting down into that floor. Let the spine move out of the pelvis, so you're going to get a little taller. You might even take a minute to squeeze the shoulders to the ears. Feel what that feels like. Can you feel that tension there? And then relax the shoulders away from the ears, letting the arms hang heavy on the lap or beside you. Maybe gently encourage the chin to tilt in slightly so you feel the crown of the head lift, and notice how that just opens up space in the back of the neck. For a moment, think about your body here. This is the sitting version of our mountain pose in yoga, right? So that feeling and embodying that stability of a mountain that has energy moving through as you breathe. John Kabat-Zinn, who I'll give you the resource for later, talks about sitting with dignity. So can you sit with dignity and embody that feeling? Good. And then we're going to take our hands and bring the arms up overhead. So reaching the arms straight up overhead, stretching long, fingertips are active. You might not be able to see my hands, but just reaching. And then on the exhale, we're going to drop the right hand over. It's going to land on the floor, or you're going to put it on the side of your chair to support you. And then reach over and stretch the side body. Notice your fingertips reaching in one diagonal and the line of the body all the way down the arm, down through the ribs, down to the hip. Again, noticing where our body is in space. Inhale, back up through center. Let the arm come up overhead, stretch. Exhale, dropping the opposite hand down to the floor or on the side of your chair for support, and then lean over. Again, noticing where is your body. Can you feel the fingertips reaching in one direction and the hip grounding down in the opposite? And even notice your legs in relation to this posture. Inhale, coming all the way back up, reaching those fingertips up. And then exhale, bringing the arms down. You might even roll the wrists a minute. Notice what it feels like to roll your wrists through the air around you. And again, roll the shoulders down and back. Relax. Relax the jaw. All right. So that was just one quick move, but take a minute to kind of reflect on the way the body feels different. So another way to just, I'm going to need to scoot up a little bit here. Another way to a skill to manage building resilience to stress and in moments of anxiety. These, I'm doing them in like kind of a sequential order, but you can utilize any of these at any point in time, right? So finally, we want to shift our perspective. So when our perceptions are flexible, our somatic response shifts and we can become less reactive and more responsive. So when we're able to shift our perception of what's happening, when we can open up to possibilities, the somatic response, the way our body is responding changes. So we're not hot, our heart rate's not up, we're not tense, we're not, feeling irritable or reacting. Then we can be less reactive and just more responsive. We can decide, we feel like we have a choice then in what we're doing. So this information and the exercise we're going to go through just now is a new one that I got. Like I said, I like to give you resources. I did a workshop with Dr. Scott Lyons, and he has a program called Somatic Stress Release. So this exercise we're getting ready to do is from him, if you'd like to, look up more information on it later. But the idea and what we're going to do is it's all about the fact that we have this orientation to language. So when we tell ourselves a story, right, in our mind, it becomes our definition of things. It becomes the way we really think about it, which is our perception. So we have this filter or lens that is going on, and then all of that becomes the reality. So the reality is the somatic response is what we do. This is not in trying to trick ourselves and tell ourselves like what you think is not real. Our reality is our reality. It's just based on our orientation to the language that we tell ourselves and our perception of what's going on around us, if that makes sense. So we're going to do a little exercise. Here's where your pen and paper will come in handy, and we're going to have to do it quickly because I always plan too much. And so you might take some more time later to do this, but just to start, I want you to take about 30 seconds, and so don't overthink it. Write what your definition of stress is. So not the definition I gave you earlier, not what you think is right, or if you're in this field, what the definition of stress is. Really think about you and what stress is like for your life. And just jot down like a sentence, a few words, whatever it is. Okay. So now with that definition of stress, repeat it to yourself a few times, like read it over and over, say it out loud. I can't hear you, so don't worry about that. As you repeat it to yourself out loud and you read it, notice how you feel in your body. What happens? Yeah. This is an exercise in really just getting friendly, like kind of knowing our stress, knowing how it affects our body and what's happening. Now I want you to write down, and again, you can take each one of these parts and do it much longer, but write down about 6 to 8 stresses in your life right now. So that's the external stress, the trigger. So not explaining them or any reasons why or like a lengthy narrative about it, just literally, and I'm not going to give you many examples because I want them to be yours, but work could be one, right? Or it could be something specific at work. So just categories, 6 to 8 stresses, just write them down. Okay. And again, those might have come quickly. It might be harder for you. So you could do this exercise a little like after our time together today, if you want to take a little time. All right. Now, underneath that, you need to have a little bit of room to write more, but we're going to do 3 columns. And I want your first column to say eustress. And the top of your second column, tolerable stress. And at the top of your third column, distress. And I should have done a slide on this, so it would have, but I didn't. I'll remember that in the future. All right. So the definition for eustress, if you want to write it down underneath it, just to remind yourself, is a positive response to pressures or demands. So positive response to pressures or demands. So it brings us focus, it brings us concentration, and we are able to accomplish it. Tolerable stress. It's burdensome and it's challenging, but we can meet it with the resources that we have available. Okay, so it's really challenging, but we have the resources and we can meet it. And then distress. This is overwhelm, overload, and we really lack the internal resources and or the external resources to get the job done, to be able to cope with it and meet the challenge. Okay, so with those working definitions and ideas, look back at your list of stressors and put them in columns. So put them in eustress. I'm able to meet the challenge. It motivates me. Tolerable. It's super challenging, but I have the resources I need to get it done. Distress, overwhelm, lacking internal or external resources. And again, some of these may be really easy to land in those different columns, those different spaces. However, if it's not, you might take more time later to really think about it. But notice as you're placing them in columns, or when you sit back and look at the whole picture, notice where your response to stress, maybe like, how it was before when you were reading your definition of your stress, it shifts when you can shift your relation of where your stress is. That sometimes when we have all the stressors all at once and we think we've got to solve them all and we have to do it all by ourselves without any other resources, that's anxiety. It's anxiety provoking and producing. But when we can shift our perspective and say, you know what, this one actually really is motivating me to get this job done. This one, because I have this deadline at work, I'm really focusing and putting a lot of attention in that area, and I'm going to accomplish this because I have all the resources I need and I'm giving myself enough time to do it. Tolerable. I got so much going on. Everybody's at home, and we got so much laundry, doing the laundry while working at home, and if I have kids at home and whatever the other thing is, that is super challenging, getting the laundry done. But I have a lot. I have a, and this is different for everyone. So if I have a washing machine at home, I may be able, that is a tolerable stress. It's challenging because I got so many other things to do and it's burdensome for me, but I'm going to get it done because I can and I've got the resources. For other, it might not be the case. Maybe your washing machine's broke. Maybe you don't have one in the apartment that you live in or whatever. And that going to the laundromat during a pandemic is burdensome to the point of like feeling overwhelming. And so that could be in a distress column at that time. So these are going to be different for everyone, and they might be different for you depending on the specific situation. But when we can shift our perspective, we shift our somatic response, and when we feel like we can be less reactive and have more choices. All right? Okay. And finally, the last thing, and I'll go through this quickly because this was kind of part of part 1 too, is value-directed action. That like we have steps to influence change in our lives starts in us, and it's in orienting to our landscape of the problem, looking at what the problem is, what is the thing that we need to tackle, what is the stress, and in which column is it, figuring out what the resources are, and then reminding ourselves we only have to take the next right action. You only have to do the next right thing. You don't have to do all the things. So figuring out what the next right action is, doing it, and that will lead us to the next, and taking it in steps. And the final piece of this is a little bit harder to maybe grasp or put our hands tangibly on, but it's in letting go or detaching from the outcomes of things that we cannot change, things that we cannot control. Meditation practice is written here because that can help us practice this, all of these things. Meditation is a top-down and a bottom-up process of managing stress, and it also is going to help in really touching or embodying these concepts of detaching and letting go, being the observer of the things that are going on in our life as stressors, and not bringing those stressors into an internal landscape of who we are. So if you need more resources on meditation practice, people that I like to read and learn from are Jon Kabat-Zinn. He has a great book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. It's a great place to start, a really easy read. Pema Chodron is also got a lot of work in meditation and in living in uncertain times and in change. So any work from her. The last book I read was Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change. So that's a good place to start. And then apps. Insight Timer is my favorite, personal favorite, but Insight Timer, Headspace, Smiling Space, there's a lot out there. So you just got to check them out and find one that works for you. Doing these skills, we're building resiliency to stress. Resiliency is our ability to be transformed from difficulties. Like I said earlier, what we have to do to be able to manage that stress is we have to ground. We have to be in the present moment. We take time to process our thoughts and our feelings and what's going on. Pay attention to them and lean into that feeling of uncertainty and anxiety that's showing up, because it's there to tell you something about your circumstance. And once we connect in ourselves and in our resources around us, then we know that we have choices, and that's when anxiety is not quite as overwhelming. We have to know we're not alone in solving our problems. So as always, I bring it right up to the end. We don't have a ton of time for questions, but if you have a question, you can throw it in the little questions tab. This is also the information of how to connect with me and Stillpoint. If you have any more questions or want to do any more work with us, there is going to be a small group processing group that won't be webinar style. It will be in a secure platform where we meet as a group online about managing stress and anxiety. And that will be coming out. We don't have the event listed yet, so you'll just have to look out for it or sign up for our newsletter and you'll see it. But we'll be doing that small group processing group. I will be leading that one in September, I believe, will start. So we're Stillpoint ILM on most things. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And you can join our newsletter by going to our website. And then my contact information is there, Jessica at stillpointcounselingandwellness.com. My business cell, which is direct to me, you're welcome to call and we can chat, 910-526-0550. And then there's our office numbers and fax numbers if you need to. Excuse me. So I made it all the way to the end almost without choking. It doesn't look like I've had any questions come through. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can. So, yes. All right. So I thank you all for being here with me today, and I will be sending a recording to you, or if you didn't attend but signed up, you'll be getting it. And let me know if you have any questions. Reach out, and I hope you have a great week ahead.